Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to today's event. We have a lot of people registered today, so we're about 1,000 folks online, so it should be quite an exciting event. My name is Tara Kamet. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Awareness. Just a few housekeeping items to get started. All participants will be muted upon entry. We will leave about 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the presentation today for all questions. Your questions can be asked via the Q&A box at the bottom right of your screen. We're going to do our best to answer as many questions as we can. What we don't get to, feel free to email Paul directly, and he will do his best to get back to you in a timely manner. Today's presentation is available for download as a PDF. Upon sign-in, you should have received notice of that in the resources area. So, on to the event. As most of you probably know Paul, but I wanted to give him a quick introduction for those of you who might not. Paul is a longtime technology journalist. He's worked for almost exclusively online since about 1999. He advises marketers and business executives on strategies to optimize their use of social media and online channels to reach buyers cost effectively. In addition to his consulting and writing, Paul does a lot of speaking and seminars. His most recent book is titled The Secrets of Social Media Marketing, 50 copies of which will be given out randomly to selected registrants from today's event, so keep your eye in the mail to see if you're a winner. And without further ado, I'm going to pass things over to Paul. Paul?
Well, thank you very much, Tara, and thanks to everyone who came in today. Obviously, a very hot topic, and I get a lot of questions about it when I do seminars like this. We've been getting a lot of people coming out and very curious about social media marketing, which clearly has I think, breached the high watermark now. It's gone mainstream. Over 300 corporations now doing some form of social media marketing, and I think we're going to see this expand very rapidly as the economic situation highlights the compelling cost advantages of this type of marketing. You know, as Tara mentioned in the introduction, my background is as a journalist, and people say, well, what are you talking about marketing for? Well, the difference in the world today, of this world of self-publishing, is that really all of us now have the capacity to be publishers. And what I found is that the background that I developed over 25 years in publishing as a journalist and as a publisher on the business side really applies to this new world. We all have the capacity to publish, and so we all have to sort of start thinking like publishers. When you get used to that idea, when you realize the power inherent in that idea, it's really very liberating. There's a lot you can do today that you couldn't just a few years ago. So let's start out by looking at the situation with the sort of overview, and I'm going to try to move my slide ahead here, which does not seem to be happening. So there we go. Okay. New media rules. The media world is changing dramatically just in the last 5 years. Of course, we've all seen that. Anybody who monitors the state of the media now, particularly in the newspaper industry, is seeing just an epic collapse going on in that business, and that is spreading into other areas as well. Magazines off dramatically in ad pages this year. This is beginning to creep into television, and many of the mainstream media, traditional mass media, are severely pressed right now to justify their continued existence in the business model that has served them so well for so many years. I don't think that mass media is ever going to be the force that it used to be, because we've had the emergence of millions of new voices in the using a variety of social media tools, who are now collectively sort of creating a new kind of mass media. And this is going to have ripple effects that will affect, I think, anybody who is in a communications capacity or running a small business, or anyone who is really interacting with customers on a regular basis. New voices are gaining influence as a result of this. You pick up any newspaper these days, and you'll find bloggers quoted as sources. In fact, it's possible for you, journalists now routinely monitor blogs and Twitter feeds and social networks to identify news stories and experts. And this means that the opportunity is there for anyone who has an expertise in any field to actually become a celebrity, to become an influencer, a factor in their market. Marketers, in effect, are becoming publishers. And that means that you can now begin to control the message. And this is one of the really liberating parts of this phenomenon, is that no longer do you have to filter your messages through a small number of media gatekeepers. You can put everything online, you can have people link back to you, and you can deliver the message yourself. That means using all the means that are at your disposal, being aware of what's available to you. And this stuff is remarkably cheap. You know, most social media tools are free, or they have a modest cost associated with them. The biggest cost, in fact, is your time, but the actual technology itself is not an inhibitor anymore. Moving ahead to the rule number one, it is to accept feedback gracefully, and to accept all feedback. And Sarah, I'm having a little bit of a problem with the slides here. I'm not sure if that's on my end or if there's a glitch with the system, but I can't seem to move them ahead. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Don't fear feedback. And, you know, that seems so natural to say, but the fact is that for a lot of companies, it's a very difficult concept to get their minds around, because our businesses for so long have been sort of steeped in the idea that everything was good, that our public face always had to be positive, and everything was going very well. The company always did the right thing, and of course we find out now that once customers gain a voice, that our warts are actually visible now for everyone to see. This can be embarrassing in some cases, and we see this in the case of this is just one example from that Dell went through about a year and a half ago when a website called The Consumerist posted an article called 39 Secrets of a Former Dell Sales Manager. And my slides don't seem to be moving, so if you wouldn't mind moving ahead to the next slide, please. Dell posted this article on concessions of a former Dell sales manager, and Dell loves these, Consumers loves to post these articles about secrets from former employees of various companies. And that article drew a modest amount of attention, but what really made it take off was when the Dell decided to give this problem of addressing this article on the Consumerist to their lawyer, and the lawyer sent off a cease and desist letter, which was absolutely the wrong thing to do. Now, in a world in which mainstream media did all the talking, you could get away with these kind of backroom discussions, but not anymore. So, next build, please. Consumerist posted the letter from the lawyer, and that's when this really took off. The people began swarming to this site to witness this debate, this fight that was going on between Dell and the Consumerist. The Consumerist, of course, delighting in the debate. And the fight actually became a much bigger story than the original story that Dell was trying to put to bed. This story hit big, and once something hits big, it can grow very big, very fast. Eventually accumulated more than 3,000 votes on Dig, and became one of the top stories in Dig's technology section. And so this story, which started as really a kind of a modest item on the Consumerist, grew out of control. And in the course of less than 48 hours, this all happened. Until finally on a Saturday night, the lead blogger at Dell, and if you could move ahead a couple of builds, please. Lead blogger at Dell, Lionel Menchaca, got on the Dell blog and admitted that Dell had mishandled the situation and apologized and said, we should have just corrected the mistake and then moved on. This is very different from how this would have been handled in the old days when there would have been backroom negotiations and the whole thing would have been handled sort of outside of public view. Now these kinds of disputes play out very much in a public manner. And that's both good and bad. Obviously we can see the bad of this in Dell's case, but the good part about that is that you can make your point of view known. You no longer have to rely on somebody deciding whether your voice can or cannot be heard. Can we move to the next slide, please? So the new world of listening to feedback is very liberating if you take advantage of listening to what customers have to say. I mean, they're all talking. All you have to do is tap into this. Dell's new approach is to be very open and participative, and this is really a big change for a company that has every reason to fear social media, having been a victim of some blogger attacks, a couple of major blogger attacks. They've actually embraced these new channels and are using them very actively to engage with their customers. And they actually have a program at Dell where every comment that appears on a blog, both pro and con, gets a response from someone at Dell. It's a remarkable program, but they're sticking with it. They've been doing this for about a year and a half. They have a site called Idea Storm where they invite people to submit their ideas for new products, and the first year they did this, they attributed more than 30 new products from Dell to ideas that were submitted by customers. Other companies are doing this as well. Starbucks is doing the same thing. Procter & Gamble has a customer contribution service that they use for a number of their products. So the idea is to integrate this customer advice into your business, and once you start listening to customers, they turn remarkably positive. In fact, when Dell first waded into the blogosphere and started to address this negativity problem, about 6 in every 10 blog posts about Dell were negative. But inside of 6 months, that was down to about 2 in every 10. So once they started listening, the attitude turned dramatically. Next slide, please. So conversations are going mainstream. This is just a sample of some of the companies that are now live with different social media campaigns. If you go to a blog called Being Peter Kim, BEING, peterkim.com, former Forrester analyst, he has a list of more than 300 companies that are doing different things in social media. And they run the gamut from basic Twitter accounts, which are quite simple, up to very sophisticated social networks, online communities, such as those being run by Starwoods and by Procter & Gamble and by Fiskars. They range from blogs to photo streams, and they're all over the place. There's just lots of experimentation going on right now. And the cost of entry is really very low, and the risk is very small at this point because it's an atmosphere, it's kind of the Wild West out there, and there is a spirit of experimentation and really forgiveness. So lots of companies, as I said, social media I think really has gone mainstream. Next slide, please. So secret number 2, start with the goal, not with the tool. And I can't emphasize this enough because I hear maybe the most common question I get from marketers is, we want to start X, we want to start a blog, we want to go on Twitter, we want to start a Facebook group, et cetera, and how should we do it? And I always say that's the wrong question. The question is not how to deploy the tool, the question is what you're trying to achieve. Next slide, please. You always should start with the goal, and then you match the tool to the goal. There are a wide variety of social media tools available to you, but the question is, what are you trying to accomplish with them? So if you want to speak without the filter of the media, a blog is a great way to do that. Can we move to the next slide? Blog is a great way to do that. If you want to communicate quickly, perhaps special information or breaking news, out to a large group, Twitter is a great way to do that. If you want to counter negative publicity, you might look to videos. If you're handling crisis management, almost any tool has some application, but something like customer conversations, you probably want to use a social network or a private community, or maybe a podcast or a video is not going to be effective. So you really need to start with what your goals are, and then look backwards into what tools are available, and then come up with a suite of tools that you think are going to do the job for you. And then deploy those on a methodical basis. You don't have to do everything at once. You don't have to do everything that's available to you. But look at a small suite of tools that you can use to test the waters, deploy them in combination, and really apply the tool that is right for the job that you're trying to accomplish. In my book, Secrets of Social Media Marketing, there's a much larger version of this chart that goes into a lot of different tactics that marketers, public relations people might want to achieve, and the appropriateness of these different tools to those goals. Next slide, please. So these are just some of the tools at your disposal. Discussion forums, very good for customer support, kind of impersonal. They've been around a long time. Blogs are, I think, as the equivalent of giving a speech. When you have a blog, it's like standing up on stage, and you have the microphone, and you can talk, and other people have a limited ability to respond to you. Microblogs are very fast, but they're not very rich. That's Twitter and other services like that. Podcasts are very effective B2B medium, have not been as effective in the business-to-consumer markets, but they have great depth, and they also have lots of personality. Social networks are great for listening. They're not so great for talking, but for hearing conversations, you really can't beat them. Social bookmarking sites drive traffic, drive awareness, measure how well you're doing, hear what your customers are saying about you. Social bookmarking sites like Delicious are actually one of the greatest ways to find out what customers are thinking. online video, flexible, a little complex, and then there's email marketing, which still has a very important place and can really tie a lot of these different tools together into one message. Next slide, please. So, secret number 3, embrace niche markets. This is also another thing that people have difficulty with because we've spent the last 100 years learning how to market to very large markets. It was all about mass marketing in the 20th century, and now in the 21st century, it's really about niche marketing. Next slide, please. And that means understanding the value of small. And small is very powerful. If you can aggregate small markets, you can achieve a much greater impact than if you address a big market. Next slide, please. And that's because people in small markets tend to be much more engaged. They have much more intense interest in the topic. And there's all kinds of crazy small markets out there. You wouldn't believe it. This is a screenshot of the Bacon group on Flickr. That's right. That's a group of over 1,700 people who trade pictures of bacon. And you wouldn't think that breakfast meat would inspire that fanatical a following, but in fact there are some very ardent bacon enthusiasts out there, and they've contributed tens of thousands of photos to this group. Now, you might say, well, that's kind of funny, but if you are the Hormel company, or if you're a company who specializes in this market, or if you are a restaurant chain, this may actually be an interesting group of people you'll want to meet. And they're out there talking to each other and exchanging their photos about something that's important to them. They're knowledgeable people. They're very engaged and responsive. And one of the things to understand, if you're in marketing, about talking to these groups of knowledgeable people is that they understand your market very well. It's not the same as dealing with a journalist. Journalists often don't have much grounding or much expertise in your market. The people who are talking in these enthusiast areas, these social networks and these bloggers, are very, very knowledgeable. So you really have to be on your toes when you're working with them. Next slide, please. And this is just one example and there are tens of thousands of people like this out there. This is Derek Lowe, PhD. He has a blog called In the Pipeline, which is all about pharmaceuticals. He's a pharmaceutical researcher, a doctorate. He has a doctorate. He has a very high level of expertise in pharmaceutical chemistry, and he's got more than 2,000 inbound links. He gets 20 to 30 comments on each of his entries, and according to Alexa, he's in the top 0.25% of all websites indexed by that service. So in the pharmaceutical industry, this one man he's a player. He's a big player, and he is doing this all by himself. This is a guy that if you're in pharma, you want to get to know because a lot of people are paying attention to what he has to say. And again, these kinds of people didn't have a platform just a few years ago for this. Next slide, please. So, secret number 4 is empowering people to talk. And by that I mean you really have to begin to open up your organization and give people lower in the organization who were not typically allowed to speak with the company before, the ability to talk about their areas of expertise. Next slide. There was a report issued by the Arthur W. Page Society about a year ago. It's a big public relations think tank, and a very impressive report about the new world of media. And one of the things they said is it's the responsibility of corporate communications to support each employee's capability and desire to be an honest, knowledgeable ambassador to customers, friends, share owners, and public officials. Perhaps no company epitomizes this better than Microsoft, a company that was widely seen as being a vicious corporate raptor after the Justice Department prosecution, and which instead of closing down in the face of those sanctions, opened up and now has over 5,000 people blogging with absolutely there's no pre-approval of anything those people say. Microsoft has them talking directly to their customers. And Microsoft is not alone. There are many companies like PricewaterhouseCoopers and Kodak that have much smaller numbers, but still on the order of 10s or 20s or 30s of people within their company who are now speaking about their areas of interest. And the company is not putting a lot of tight restrictions on what they say. They're trusting them to express their knowledge to people who would be interested in that information, and it's working because those people honestly want to help, and it's fabulous for the image of the company to see all of these intelligent people who are now exposed and now have a chance to speak and show off what they know. Next slide, please. So I talked to Ben Popkin, who's the editor-in-chief of Consumerist, about this whole idea of being human. And by the way, the Consumerist recently acquired by Consumer Reports, so actually it will be a very mainstream conduit of public opinion. He said if a company does something wrong and then fixes it, it stirs up much more customer loyalty than if they didn't do something wrong in the first place. And I love this quote because I think it is so much about the human condition and how much we appreciate fallibility. We like it when something goes wrong and somebody is a little bit embarrassed and they have to recover and they resolve to be better. They resolve to be better for the experience. We like people like that. We appreciate those experiences. It's a very human experience. Well, companies can be human too. And a lot of what social media is about is humanizing companies. So it's okay if there's a little negativity out there, that's fine. Acknowledge it. Promise to do something about it. Address it. Doesn't mean that you have to do what people tell you to do, but it does mean address the fact that there is negativity and resolve that you're going to be a better company for it. And you will get so much appreciation from people. They really want companies to interact with them, and showing that human side of your company can pay off big in your public image, because everyone knows that companies aren't perfect. Next slide, please. One great example, I think, of allowing employees to speak for the company is the Transportation Security Administration, which is quite possibly maybe the second most hated U.S. government agency behind the IRS. Not many people like the TSA because they see it as an organization that hassles them at airports. But the TSA does have good reasons for doing what they do, and they felt that their message was not being carried forward in the media, so they decided to take their message directly to the public. So a year ago, they launched this blog, The Evolution of Security, in which they talk about why the TSA does what it does. Why do you need a one-quart plastic bag to put the liquids in? There's actually a reason for that, and they explain that on this blog. Interesting is that this blog is written by a small number, about 5 people within the TSA, who are all people you would see at the airport check-in counters. They're not executives, they're not suits, they're people that ordinary visitors can relate to. And this blog has done very, very well for them. In fact, I was passing through the airport just a couple of weeks ago, and they've got stickers pasted up all over the X-ray machines promoting this blog. They're very pleased with this opportunity to go directly to the public, but it's very important that they let their employees do the talking. Going back to the case of Microsoft, there's 2 people at Microsoft who have never had blogs, Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer. Microsoft knew early on that initiative was going to work if the people did the talking, the people inside the company. The public did not want to hear more from these executives. They wanted to hear from the people who work there. So use this as an opportunity to identify and to unearth those talented people within your organization who have something to say. Give them a forum to say it. Next slide, please. So, secret number 5, listen before speaking. And next slide, please. I'm going to move through these kind of quickly now. There are lots of tools you can use to listen. These are just a few of the services that are available out there. Delicious social bookmarking service. Dig is bookmarking with an attitude. Clipmarks bookmarking. Magnolia bookmarking. There are search engines, specialized search engines like Excite and Zula. It's not all about Google. There are some very interesting search engines out there. I'd encourage you to give Ask.com a try, to give MSN a try, and some of the search engines, meta search engines like Dogpile and Zula that search a number of different search engines simultaneously. There are social networks, more than 3,000 at last count, such as Going, which is a regional social network. There's Yelp, which is people contributing restaurant reviews and reviews of local services by cities. There's Wikipedia, and you should be looking at what Wikipedia is saying about your company and your market. That's that's the number, essentially the number 1 or 2 resource on the internet, most trafficked source on the internet. Not to mention, of course, Facebook and the other giant social networks. Lots and lots of services that will enable you to keep your ear to the ground. Next slide, please. And when you're keeping your ear to the ground, you want to be aware of alternatives to Google for measuring popularity. I do a whole seminar on this, but I think just a real basic overview. There's something like Technorati Profiles. That's a great site for showing the relative influence of bloggers. There is the magical Google link command. You know, if you type link colon and then a site name or a URL into Google, it'll tell you who's linking to it. It'll give you a full list of that, of everybody who's linking to it. That's a great resource. Next slide, please. Lots of interesting little-known tools you can use to find out what people think of you. This is a page from Delicious, and I love Delicious because I think of it as a human-powered search engine. People bookmark pages on Delicious, and they comment on them, and they tag them, and then you can take your company URL, type it into there, and you can get a list of what dozens or even hundreds or thousands of people are saying about you. They'll comment about your company. They'll tag, their tags reflect what they think about your company, and this can be very invigorating when you see in such, so quickly and so comprehensively how your message is being perceived by your potential customers. Next slide, please. So lots of tools like this. They're really fun when you dig into them. They can also become addictive. You can spend your whole day on them. Secret number 6, think like a publisher. I said this at the outset. Next slide, please. And I know this is a big change. Everybody now has the capacity to be a publisher. You do not have to have $20 million in presses and mailing permits and circulation lists and all that stuff that you used to need to start a publication. I've started a few publications, so I know how complex it is. You can go directly online. You can be publishing. Of course, go to wordpress.org or to blogger.com, and you can be publishing inside of a matter of minutes. Now, publishing is not the same as achieving a following, and for that, you really have to sweat the details, and it takes time, and it does take hard work, but the results can be remarkable. What one person can do today using these tools is just would have been unimaginable a few years ago. This is Bruce Schneier. He's an expert on computer security. And he's got some of the metrics, the new age metrics that people look at. How many Technorati fans does he have? Google's indexed 3,700 of his pages. He's in the top 1/6 of 1% of all bloggers websites on the internet, according to Alexa. He's been bookmarked in Delicious 2,000 times. That's a pretty influential guy. And as a result, not surprisingly, he's also been cited in the New York Times 136 times. 193 in InfoWorld, and so on and so forth. And it's just him. It's just this one guy, Bruce Schneier, doing this all by himself, using these fantastic tools that are available to him. Those tools are available to you as well. You can achieve that level of prominence if you stick to it and if you use the tools that are available and you work hard at it. Next slide, please. You can use these tools to advise and educate. There's a great example I love is the Clutter Control Freak blog, which is run by a company called Stacks and Stacks. They make equipment for organizing offices and homes, and they have a blog that they use to show people how to get their lives more organized. And they're had tremendous success with their traffic. A very quick launch. They've got bloggers, guest bloggers who contribute to it, and the whole thing is surrounded by messaging and advertising for Stacks and Stacks. But the core of this blog is a helpful advisory service, and I really encourage you to look at it that way. This is a way to share your expertise, to share your advice with people who care about the same things that you do, and then you can put your messaging all around that. People are reading this advice in the context of your brand message, and it works very well because you're engaging them, you're not selling to them. Next slide, please. So, secrets of visibility online, really quick. Scrap the meaningless terms. People don't talk. Customers are not searching for next generation or leading edge. They do not use those terms. Think of the terms that people are going to search for. Think of the problems they're trying to solve. Align your search engine strategy with that. Focus on a few keywords. Use them everywhere. Don't use them more than 5 times on a page, or Google starts decrementing you for that. It's a wonderful book I recommend called Search Engine Marketing, Inc. I think every marketer should have that on their bookshelf. It explains the whole soup to nuts how search engines work and really will help you avoid the potholes. Enlist everyone in the company to help, to link to your critical websites from their blogs, from their various online outposts, because that all builds Google love. Look at search results over time. See how you're moving ahead. Understand how search engine works, because you're probably going to get 40% of your traffic from search engines. And stick with it. It's amazing. In the short term, you won't see much impact. In the long term, and I'm talking 6 to 9 months and beyond, you will really begin to rise up those search rankings. You'll develop traffic, and you'll be very gratified by the results you'll have if you work hard at it. Moving on to the next slide, please. It's a 13-week campaign, and this is another sort of challenging some of the shibboleths of conventional marketing. Marketing has historically been done in the quarterly and semi-annual campaigns, but this really doesn't work in social media because you have to prepare for success. If you're successful, your little campaign, your little blog, or your little outpost on Facebook may be there a long time, and you need to be able to continue to feed that community and grow that community beyond just the quarter. Next slide, please. This is difficult to get your arms around, I know, because ad buying schedules don't necessarily fit conveniently with this concept. But let's take a blog, for example. If you're trying to build a corporate blog, you really need to look at it in terms of stages. Your first quarter is going to be spent building awareness, showing steady growth. You will not see great results during that time. Don't worry about it. Stick with it, and during the second and third quarters, you will begin to see that search traction. You'll begin to see inbound links. By the time you get to the third quarter, you should be really looking at making the top 10 results on Google for your targeted queries. Your traffic becomes self-sustaining. It will move up in stages. And you will find, remarkably, that you'll be on the order of hundreds or thousands of visitors a day within 9 to 12 months. And that's when this really gets to be fun, because traffic builds on traffic. That viral phenomenon takes effect, and you start to see the jumps in your traffic actually become bigger the larger your traffic base is. By the time you get to a year, you should be looking at really 3 to 4 times the traffic, the average traffic, as you did during the first quarter, and you should be looking at spinning off, maybe creating other blogs, other online posts, or maybe a social network. You should be expanding into Twitter. You should be using that brand that you've been building online and leveraging it through some of these other tools. Next slide, please. Put communities to work. This is an awareness webinar, so they're all about that at awareness. And let me show you some of the great ideas that are being used out there. Next slide, please. Communities are the big new phenomenon of the last 2 years. Really, MySpace kicked it off, and then Facebook, of course, in the last 2 years, and YouTube. Those are the big brands, but what's really interesting, I think, about communities are all the small communities that are popping up. And that there are some 3,000 other small communities for things like travel and moms and childcare and home improvement and e-learning, all kinds of specialized communities that are popping up, and they're good for so many different things. I mean, at their base level, they're great for peer support. If anybody's used them for supporting your computer or your cable TV, you know how effective communities can be for just getting technical questions answered. They're a great way to market virally, to plant ideas. You get a couple of thousand people who raise their hand and say, we want to be fans of your company. That's a great foundation for viral marketing, because you can plant ideas, announcements to those people, and ask them, please spread this, please tell your friends about this. And if they're your fans, they're going to help you do that. They're great ways for testing. You can put products out there, put ideas out there. Hear what people have to say about your ideas. Tweak them, tune them, decide. Maybe it's a crazy idea. They'll tell you that. You can do that in public communities. You can do it in private communities. But who wouldn't want to get feedback before you spend a lot of money on a new product? Who wouldn't want to get some affirmation from your customers that it's a good idea? You can use them to define needs, to research them and find what new markets may exist, needs you weren't aware of. You can use them actually for iterative development. As I mentioned at the outset, what Dell, Procter & Gamble, Starbucks, and others are doing in actually involving customers actively in the development process, they're farming out some of their engineering, their R&D, to their customers. Next slide. A lot of these markets are just sitting there. One of my favorite examples is the Nikon groups on Flickr. And when Nikon went into Flickr a couple years ago, Flickr is a big photo sharing site for high-end photo sharing. They discovered there were about 30,000 people who had already self-organized into Nikon fan groups. And you talk about the biggest no-brainer in the world. This was an easy decision for Nikon. These people were already enthusiastic about Nikon. Nikon just had to leverage that, and so they started forming their own groups. They invested in some advertising. They did some contests. They actually send out new cameras to a small group of people from these groups who are very committed Nikon enthusiasts, and they ask them for testing on their new products. They are leveraging this group all over the place. And really, why wouldn't you want to? These are the people who are most likely to buy Nikon cameras and to spread the good word. Very inexpensive campaign for Nikon, but enormously effective because those 60,000 people who are now members of those groups are 60,000 of the best customers in the world Nikon could have. And I mentioned the bacon site earlier. Go out and look at the markets that you're in and find the groups that are already out there. You'd be amazed how many groups there are on Flickr that people who just take pictures of trucks. Just semi-hauler trucks or tractor trailers. They're fanatics about this stuff. If you're in the trucking industry, if you make trucks, you want to know about those people. Lots of other examples like this. Let's move ahead to the next slide. Brand ambassadors, I think, is really where you kind of the holy grail of social networking is when you can create when your customers actually become arms of your sales force. I love the example. My latest book, I opened with the example of Fiskars, which is the Finnish maker of high-end cutting implements. Everyone is familiar with their shears with the big plastic handles. Well, when they were seeing about 2 years ago that they were being drawn down, inventories being drawn down by Walmart and big box retailers, devoting less space to high-end cutting products, they knew that they had a problem. They had to find new sales channels, and those channels were going to be from the specialty shops. And I decided to focus on scrapbookers, people who are enthusiastic scrapbookers, and use them as a way to move their message and move their product into specialty craft retailers. So they created this group called the Fiskateers, thinking that there might be maybe 300 or 400 of these scrapbookers they could encourage to join. In fact, today there are well over 4,000 members of the Fiskateers. The Fiskateers are a fanatical group. My wife is actually a Fiskateer, and people come to these meetings and they're just nuts. They love scrapbooking. They love meeting each other, and they have a very online active community. Fiskars gives them lots of stuff. There's lots of swag that they give away, but in exchange they get so much wonderful feedback. And by the way, when you become a Fiskateer, you get a sales package from Fiskars. They say, please go out to your specialty retailers and tell them about all the great products that we sell. And guess what? Their same-store sales tripled inside of 1 year as a result of this campaign. And as I like to say, if a company that was founded in 1649 can do this, then anybody can. And that's just one example, though. There's Disney's Mickey Moms panel. They find the members of the Mickey Moms spend on average about 20% more on Disney vacations as anybody else does. So that's a group that they want to cultivate. Starwoods is one of several hotel chains that has destination travel sites where people can share their photos and their experiences about travel in a Starwoods branded environment. P&G has Capessa for mothers and many other sites that they have, social networks that they have developed around their different product lines that are aimed at a certain demographic group and offers helpful advice to those people in a branded environment, but without the brand dominating the conversation. Next slide, please. So, Secret 9 used the STRAIGHT principle in all communications. Now, every book author has to have an acronym, and mine is called STRAIGHT. So, in the next slide, this may be a little bit long, but I was trying to narrow it down to what are the principles of communication that you really need online. Succinct. You need to be. People do not want to spend a lot of time reading online. So, get your message across clearly and quickly. Break it up. There's nothing wrong with breaking a message up into 3 different parts and posting it as 3 different entries or 15 different Twitter entries. It's all going to create search engine love for you. You want to be transparent because, believe me, you can't get away with being opaque these days. Everyone's got a cell phone. Everyone's got a Twitter account. Everyone's got a cell phone camera. It's really, really hard to cover up your mistakes these days. So why bother? Just let them happen. Admit to them. Resolve to get better. You'll get a lot of credit from people from doing that. It's called transparency, and it's what this medium is all about. We really can't afford to cover things up very much anymore. Responsiveness is important because if you're going to talk online, if you're going to go in and use these communities, you better be ready to have conversations. Don't start this activity unless you're ready to respond to what people say. Accept criticism, accept it gracefully, and accept it constructively. The best way to head off somebody who's in a bad mood is to listen to what they say. You'll turn that frown upside down real quickly, believe me. Insightful, offer something that's useful. Don't just blather, and don't just put your press releases out there on your blog. Say something that is going to be interesting. Be genuine and humorous. Humorous is so important. And if you want proof, just go to YouTube and look at the most popular videos on YouTube. Almost all of them are humor. It's a great way to use video as a viral marketing medium. And timely, don't wait a month to respond to someone's comment on your blog or in your discussion group. You really need to get in there within 24, 48 hours and respond and continue that conversation. Next slide, please. And we're going to wind it up here so we can get on to questions. Encourage and respond to comments. Start by commenting elsewhere. Become part of the discussion, part of the community, by commenting on other people's sites, their blogs, their social networks. Play reporter. You can go out and get people who are interested in your industry to be interview subjects and post the interviews on your website. Serialize. Take your top 10 tips and post it as 10 one-tip posts over a period of 10 days. Play around with your information. Break it up. Recombine it in different ways and find ways to reuse information in a way that's compelling. End of the year, do your best of the year roundup. You'll probably get some of the biggest traffic of the year to that kind of feature. So experiment with different ways to package information. Thematically, give away little trinkets, little goodies. You'd be amazed what people will do for a T-shirt. And use all the tools that are available, your photos, your videos, your audio. They can be used. Almost any of these media can support multiple media now, so use whatever you're good at. Next slide, please. Number 10, reuse and syndicate. And this is really about, you shouldn't be publishing information just once. You can publish what starts as a Twitter entry. Several Twitter entries may become a blog post. Several blog posts may become a white paper, and then you can submit those and syndicate those to multiple services. I love this example of Reba Haas, who's a realtor in the Seattle area. One of many people who I think does this very well, but has really achieved great business benefits. She is consistently the number 1 or 2 RE/MAX realtor in Seattle, and that's because she decided to become a celebrity. Now, she didn't go to the TV stations or the newspapers asking for a little of their time. She just decided to use all of the tools that were available to her to publish. So it all starts with Reba's blog. But the items that she publishes on her blog are repurposed for Rain City Guide. She's very active on LinkedIn. She uses it as a hub of communications to work her network and to send people to valuable resources within her network. She is publishing on Facebook. She's publishing on MySpace. She is using all of these different channels to publish. And it's not a matter of having to create original content for each channel. Very often it's just reusing, repackaging, rewording information from one place to another. You know, we're about to have a new president step in. This president was a member of 12 different social networks during his campaign. You say, well, how can one candidate be active in 12 different social networks? Well, they were posting the same stuff. The Obama campaign was posting the same stuff in these different networks, but they had a gay network and a couple of Latino networks, and they had Black Planet, and they had networks for different age groups, and in each of these networks they were getting different feedback. They were starting different conversations, and those were all contributing to understanding better who their constituency was. So very often using different channels, the same content will elicit very different responses. Next slide, please. And that's it for me, and I think we have about 15 minutes for questions, so I'm going to hand it back to Tara and ask to go right to that.
Okay, we have a lot of questions, so we're going to do our best to get to them, and I'm just going to roll right into it. But Paul, a question that a lot of people kept sending out was, could you say the name of that search engine book again?
Yes. I can't say it enough. It's called Search Engine Marketing, Inc., and the authors are Bill Hunt and Mike Moran. It's a little expensive. I think it's around $40, but it's worth every penny. The first 100 pages alone are worth the price.
Great, thank you. First question from Keith. Without some sort of checks and balances system in place to validate the content being published, how does a company prevent false information from entering the market, especially with there being so many various posting locations, et cetera?
Well, you can. That's a good question. You can, of course, you should have internal rules about what people can and can't say. And most companies have non-disclosure agreements and disclosure policies that should very much carry forward online. As far as and there should someone who knowingly publishes something wrong information while they're working for your company should be dealt with as a discipline issue. I mean, that's not acceptable. In terms of the public areas, I think that there are two ways you can respond. You can respond directly by going to that person either through email or commenting on their blog, or heaven forbid, picking up the phone, and you can tell them that they got it wrong. You set the record straight. What's more popular, I think, for large companies is they set up their own online sort of, telling the truth about website. If there's a lot of misinformation out there, you can now go online and tell your story from your perspective. And I love the example of General Motors, which certainly is a troubled company, but has been an innovator in this field. They felt that there was a lot of misinformation out there about General Motors, and so that's one reason that company started blogging. They wanted to tell it from their perspective, and that's been very, very effective. They don't send letters to the editor anymore. They post the comments on the blog because they get much better traffic that way, and everybody sees it.
Okay. Next question from Tim. How can we find influencers in a specific domain? Is it only possible by browsing and listing the web, or are there other avenues?
Well, you always want to start with Google, and then I think Technorati is a great resource. There are actually if you want to find influencers, the best way to find them is other influencers. And one thing is there are directories out there that have wonderful vertical breakdowns. One of my favorites is called Alltop, ALLTOP. It is actually started by Guy Kawasaki, and it is a directory of blogs organized topically. And you can find hundreds of different topics there, and they've done the work for you. I find the most effective means of identifying influencers is to find one influencer who really hits the mark for you, and then look at their blog roll, because chances are that they have got links to bloggers and websites there that they follow. And those people are much more likely to be influencers than playing around with search engines and Technorati rankings and trying to untangle these various metrics. So people will, by virtue of their blog roll, by virtue of their Twitter followers, you can often shortcut that process and very quickly find out who else is important in their market.
Okay. This next question is, when is the right time to move from leveraging free social media to hosting your own community?
That's a great question, and I would say I wish I could say 50. I work with an organization that has about 500 members that they have on Ning, and they're pushing the limits of what Ning can do in its free social network, and they really should be soon looking at going to a branded social network. I'd say that when if you're using one of the social network platforms such as Facebook, you can scale up to several thousand people, but there's not much you can do with it. You're a very limited set of functionality. If you want to get into a lot of member-to-member interaction, specialized features such as commerce or gated areas, if you want to be doing webcasts and screen sharing and some of the fancier online tools, you're going to top out probably in the hundreds of members before you have to move to a specialized service. Discussion boards, on the other hand, very basic functionality, can move up well into the thousands.
Okay. Next question we have, what are some B2B specific areas or activities one should consider, or case study examples you might have on successful programs?
On B2B, I think B2B is B2B is boring, and I say that as someone who's worked in B2B for 25 years. It's not much for flash and glitz, but that doesn't mean it's not effective. I mentioned Microsoft a couple of times. A lot of what Microsoft does in social media is B2B, and they're basically using blogs and some online video to accomplish most of that heavy lifting. Blogs are probably the most effective B2B mechanism. Blogs and podcasts, actually, believe it or not, podcast listeners, according to eMarketer, have about twice the percentage of active podcast listeners are in upper income brackets and upper education brackets as non-listeners, because podcasts are so time efficient. Video, I find, is not very good for reaching B2B. Twitter is actually excellent. Very active B2B community on Twitter because it saves people so much time. So I think that maybe the more prosaic, the more mundane of the social media technologies, such as blogs and Twitter and podcasts, actually do seem to work better in B2B applications. Social networks, it's catch as catch can. I think video is really hard to make work, except sort of using it as a maybe a secondary educational medium, or for your collateral, your promotional collateral. Those fancier applications, social networks also tend to be more consumer oriented. Those fancier applications seem to work better in consumer markets.
Okay. Next question. What should or can be outsourced, or what should be kept in-house in a typical model?
Well, the only thing you want to keep in-house is the content, right? Everything else can be anything that's a commodity should be outsourced as cheaply as possible. And I say certainly computers, right? You can use Amazon EC5 cloud computing, and you don't need to build server farms anymore. Most web operations are heavily outsourced, and you can even outsource things like your web maintenance, your programming. There's plenty of good resources in India that will do that for a fraction of what it costs in the U.S. now. The only thing you shouldn't outsource is content, and I say that's somewhat. I'm not 100% committed to that, because there are, I think, some companies use outside experts effectively, contract with outside experts. But if you're using a social media tool to promote your own expertise, then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you're farming it out to a lot of outsiders. So I bring in outsiders for things like editing, for posting, for page design. All that kind of stuff can be outsourced, but the expertise should stay inside.
Okay, this is a great question from Laura. We're struggling with whether we have multiple social media campaigns with each focused on a separate product or a separate audience, or if we combine them all. How should we think about this?
Multiple social media campaigns with each focused on a separate audience, or combine them all. There's not a lot of specifics there to work with. I would say that social media campaigns, again, don't start with the tool. I mean, start with the campaign and say what tools make sense for the campaign. It's almost impossible to answer that question as it's worded, and you might want to follow up with an email to me on that with a little more specifics, because you can do it both ways. I don't like to be vague about that, but it's hard to give you a good answer.
Okay. What's the best way to promote a community virally?
Have something interesting that people want to consume. And I know that sounds dumb, but it really is. You can't game this system. You can't buy your way. You can't buy viral success. You have to have something that's really interesting. And I would say that the best way is get your most creative people in there to a skull session. Start chalking up the board and come up with some wild ideas, and just see what's going to see what everybody gets excited about. Now, as far as how you actually promote it, if you have a good idea out there, I think you want to use every vehicle you can. You want to send out. I'm a big fan of influencer marketing, finding the bloggers who will be interested in your topic, and telling them about the existence of this resource, whether it's a video or a game or a widget or something of that nature. Tell them that it's available. You invite them to try it and to give you feedback on it. I think you want to promote it in every piece of collateral you have. Every piece of paper that goes out of your office, every printed direct mail item should have a notice for this new campaign of yours. And I think you want to you want to Twitter about it. You want to keep the buzz up. You have all these tools that can to spread the message, and you want to be spreading the message sort of constantly through all of these tools, as many people as you can make aware. And it's amazing. Sometimes the channels that you don't think are going to work for you will work very well. I've seen messages that have spread on Twitter much faster, much more effectively than they ever would have spread through a blog. Or sometimes if you have a Facebook group with people who are enthusiasts about whatever you're doing, go in and tell people, post messages on the Facebook group, post it as your on your profile page. What are you doing right now? Tell it. Keep repeating the message through whatever means possible. There's so many of them now.
Okay. Another question. We'll try to get to one or two more after this. This is from James. What is important to measure? Which metrics are important to measure?
Impossible to say, because it depends on the situation. I don't think that's the question. You will find people who say things like, abandon rate or time spent on site is important. I personally like repeat visitors because I think that's a measure of stickiness. I like to see multiple page views per visitor. I like that. Some people just want to see page views. The important question is not what metrics work, it's what metrics are going to work for you. Because there may be some cases where those metrics are not important. I'll give you an example. If you have a public image problem, if you're trying to create awareness in the mainstream media, your metric may be headline mentions in newspapers. Okay, that has nothing to do with your electronic efforts, but your electronic efforts can influence that. Or it may be increasing overall number of leads that come into your sales channel, and that may be through a combination of factors of which online media is only one. So I think the important thing is come to an agreement about what you want, what metrics are important to you, and don't boil the ocean. Look for 3, 4, 5 metrics that really count, and then focus on driving those numbers up. There's no one size fits all in this area.
Do you have any tips to increase kind of the awareness of a locally promoted community but on a national level?
Of a locally promoted community but on a national level? Well, I would. That's a difficult question. Again, without a lot of specifics, I think that you look for interest groups elsewhere in the country that are synchronous to yours. So if your local community is about, I don't know, real estate, there are going to be other groups in other communities that have that similar interest. Finding those other groups and making contact with the administrators of those groups, and I really recommend most groups have a point person or a small number of point people who really sort of shepherd the group. You want to go to those people and forming the relationships with them. See what you can do about trading links with them, about maybe doing some joint online programs. Maybe you can do a webcast. Webcasts are cheap and easy to do these days. Maybe you can do a joint webcast. Maybe you can do a joint teleconference, or you can cooperate on some projects where you both contribute to it. So I'd say look for other groups that are similar to yours elsewhere in the country and strike up partnerships.
Okay, and we'll kind of wrap things up with this last question from Chris. And anybody that we didn't get to, again, you can email Paul directly, and he'll try to get back to you.
What I'll do is I'm going to answer as many questions as I can as blog posts. It's going to take probably a few days, depending on how many questions I get. But or you can just give me the questions, Tara, from this that we didn't get to, and I can answer those on my blog.
Perfect. How can you keep up with all of the social media marketing tools out there?
You can't. Don't even try. It's crazy. You go nuts. What you should do, I try to focus on a few people who I think really know the landscape. And, Chris Brogan, a friend of mine, Chris, B-R-O-G-A-N, one of the top 100 bloggers, he's the guy who knows everything. I try to find people like that because if it's important, Chris is going to write about it. There's other people like that, and if you want to find them, as I mentioned, find the person you like, and then look in their blog roll. It's going to point you to other people like them. I try to monitor really a half dozen people who I think are very tuned in to the different tools, and they will prevent me from missing something entirely. On top of that, I subscribe to a number of newsletters in the media world, Media Post and iMedia Connection and MIN, and there are several. I find the newsletters from the professional media organizations do a good job, and I really am a big fan of Media Post, actually. I think they do a terrific job of keeping up with the big stories in social media space, and they'll also make sure that you don't miss anything big.
Great. Just an end note for anybody looking for the recording link, the PDF file of today's presentations. It'll be posted on the awareness site tomorrow at awarenessnetworks.com/resources. I'll also blog about it and post those links as well in our community, and that's, again, awarenessnetworks.com/community. So with that, we're going to wrap up, and we're going to do our best to get to the questions offline that we weren't able to get to today. Paul, thank you so much for your time. It was a fantastic event.
Thanks, Tara. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Thanks for coming.